All right, welcome to the brain-friendly reading lesson on Bossy R's. Sometimes those are called R-controlled vowels. And when we introduce R-controlled vowels to children, we want to tell them that it is another syllable type. These Bossy R's show up at the end of our vowel team chart, our vowel team chapping chart. They're at the bottom of the vowel team chapping chart. And we can tell children that this is the part that we are going to work with, right down here. These are called the Bossy R's. Do you see how there's a black line around them? And every vowel has an R after it. That R controls the vowel and makes it say something different than we would think. Each one of these has their own sound, don't they? You know that because you've been tapping your vowel team chart. And before you introduce this Bossy R work, whether you're in the classroom or whether you are tutoring, you want to make sure that the child has already been tapping their team's chart, because by tapping the team's chart before you introduce this work, the child is going to be able to do so much more because they already will have practiced the sounds that are in the Bossy R work. The sounds in the Bossy R work are A, R, car, R. O-R, orange, or, E-R, flower, I-R, first, U-R, church, So when we introduce this to a child, we say, so today we're going to work with our Bossy R page, and we'll have tapped our charts. We're going to dictate some of the sounds off of the vowel team chart to the child to write in their salt tray or onto a piece of paper. We could dictate sounds off of their consonant blends chart also, or even some of the short vowel sounds. Today we're going to do AR. So let's tap AR at the top of our page. AR, car, R. Oh, it's just like our chart, isn't it? Yeah. AR, car, R. AR, car, R. And they can write that in their salt tray. They can write it on their piece of paper. Can you write that for me? AR, R. A-R-R, A-R-R. Do you want to write it on the table? You can ask the child. A-R-R. Whoops. A-R-R. A-R-R. And maybe the child wants to air write it too, holding their hand up in the air and making the shape. A-R-R, in the same way that they did on the paper or on the table in front of them. You might even have, if you're working with a small group or an individual situation, you might have a write-on wipe-off board available for the child to be able to use to write their A-R-R on the write-on wipe-off board. So that gets lots of there's lots of pleasure with using write-on wipe-off markers. So we've done our A-R-R, and now we're going to think about what words have R in them. So I'm going to give you a couple of words to think of with R. If we do, we're going to arm tap some words, R, and the child's going to arm tap them. Oh, that R is at the end, isn't it? Ard. Where do you hear R? In the middle, on my elbow. How about another one? Part, art. Hear R right here. Arm. Oh, it's right on my elbow again. How about smart? Art. Where did you hear that? Right on your elbow. Yeah, R, A-R-R is almost always on our elbows. It's almost always in the middle of a syllable. Sometimes, and just a couple of words, it comes at the end, but usually it's right in the middle. So then you have some options about what to do with the child. You can dictate words, and they can use their letters to be able to build the words. You can dictate words, and the child can arm tap the word and write the word on their page. Those are some different ways you can explore doing word work, using the arm tapping and the word building with a child. And you can do that with children who are 5. You can do that work with children who are 6. You can do that with children who are 12 and 13 and 14 who still are reading at this level. that activity doesn't really change. So that's the beginning of AR when you start to work with R. You can also ask the child to use the pages. And by the time they've gotten to this far in the work, they are going to be ready to use these pages unless they're very young, unless you're teaching this work to a 5 or a 6-year-old, which is not often the case in a tutoring environment. There aren't many parents paying for tutors for their 5-year-olds. But when you use this work with a child, one of the things you can do is take them on a hunt for R. Where do you see R? Oh, right here. Let's go ahead and can you highlight R? And maybe they want to highlight R, or maybe they want to bring this in. Maybe they want to underline R. Maybe they don't even have a marker and all they have is a pencil in the classroom and they're going to underline it. And one of the strategies that's so helpful is to have the child say R when they underline it. For some children, they say R, 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 and they come back and they read bar, scar, hard, part. But for some children, they need to read the word when they underline it. R, ch, art, chart, R, smart, smart, R, sp, arc, spark, mar. And they might underline it and read it at the same time, which is the goal, right? So if they underline it and they go marsh, that's perfect, what I was just starting to do. One of the other strategies that you can use, and this goes for all the Bossy R work, for all the vowel team work, really for any work, is that if you have a child that's struggling to read the word, they, by pointing at the pieces, y, r, n, yarn. If they're struggling with that, have them read it on their arm. And it's the same as arm spelling, that they take their arm out and while they're looking at it, they go y, r, n, y, r, n. And they put those sounds on their arm and they blend it together using their arm. That's not often, but it's a good tool to have in your pocket so that you can stop pointing at the letter, hoping they're going to read the word, and that you can put it on their arm. In fact, if they're having a lot of trouble blending, taking them back to word building is your next best bet. If they're having trouble going R, k, ard, and they can't quite get that to go together, then going back to using your tiles where they put k, ard on their arm, take out the letters for card, and then read card. That is that's the strategy. That is an in-between strategy when you have a child who's struggling. So those are the 1-syllable words. And there's some pieces to know about all of these pages that I'm just going to go through quickly. You have some 2-syllable words on every single page, and then a lot of the pages have another level of difficulty. On this page, there's words that end in Y and LY. There's a section here that says WAR says war. Well, we haven't even done OR, or, but the child knows OR, orange, or, because you've been tapping it. So we're going to tell them that W is bossy, and W makes AR say something different. And they perhaps have already done the WA work, where A no longer says ah, it says, like in wash, it says ah. So here we have or, war, and wart, and warm, and swarm. And down here where it's QU, remember QU is made up of 2 sounds, w, and that w is bossy, qu, quart. Oh, it says or, doesn't it? And that close examination of the word is helpful for the dyslexic child. Down here at the bottom, you have several more bits and pieces that you can teach to the child. Now, if you have a child who's back here really just working on blending 4 and 5 letter words, you are not going to necessarily get to all these pieces in one lesson. Again, this is a page that has multiple levels of difficulty on it so that you can use this work with a child for whom this work is straightforward, but reading 2-syllable words is their instructional level. Or perhaps you have a child who's reading 2-syllable words okay, and they're ready to tackle some of these more specific reading and spelling skills. Down here at the bottom, we have where ARR says air. It's a syllable division that's vowel, R, R, vowel. And the R is right here. When you do this work with a child, you say, let's find where it says air, A-R-R, air, air. Oh, there's that Y baby E, nair, E. And the child can come in and find their air. Another way to do it is to mark the vowels, mark the R's, and you have vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel, and you can divide right down the middle. The tricky part about that is some kids will say it's mar-re, and it's not mar-re. But it's one strategy that some people find is helpful with the children they're working with. Then another piece is to say that AR can come at the end of a word and say Look at that. AR says at the end of a 2-syllable word. And when AR is with D at the end of a word, it says, ARD says erd, backward, upward. And you can syllable divide those with the child as they need to. One last piece on this page is that some of the words that have AR in them, and this VE has VE after it, VE shows up in many different places, but it shows up with AR too, that we're going to remember here that words never end in the letter V. If you hear V at the end of a word, it's spelled VE, like with starve and carve. And I'll remind you guys that both as teachers and tutors, that these little boxes are not meant to have every single piece of thing you could possibly know. The boxes are here to give you a reminder about what is this piece that you might need to remember to bring the child's attention to. They're meant to be like cheat sheets almost for you, or the parent, if this is being taken home for the parent to work with. So just keep that in mind, that that's what those are for. So that's AR. When you go to the OR page, you'll notice that it's similar in many ways, that there's instructions at the top, and there's single syllable words, and there's multi-syllable words. There's a section where you have ORE at the end of a word, and maybe you want the child to box that piece instead of highlighting it. Boxing is another strategy that you can use. Maybe not, the children don't have highlighters or markers that you're working with. It's okay. Underlining and boxing do the same thing for the brain as highlighting and using markers. OR says at the end of a 2-syllable word. At that point, you can remind the child what you learned with your AR page and take that back out. Oh my gosh, AR said at the end of a 2-syllable word too. They both say There's a place on here where WOR says were, like in word and work and worm, and you can link that back to the work they did before where W was bossy with AR. And then we put in some commonly misspelled words so that you can work with children on the spellings for those words. And there's cues at the top for some of the pieces that are on the page. When you get to ER is the most common Bossy R. It's not the first one that we do because we're just going to follow our chart, but ER is the most common. It shows up at the end of words. It shows up in the middle of words. It shows up at the end of verbs. and it can be a suffix that means one who. And there is a row here of words where ER acts as a suffix saying one who. A banker is one who banks. A kicker is one who kicks. And this is part of that word study that's helpful to children to understand about affixes, about suffixes and prefixes and how they change base words or root words. I like to call them base words. There are other places on this page where you have ER functioning as a suffix, and that's okay. Children might decide, oh, I think there are more places where ER is acting as a suffix. Well, good for them if they decide to do that work, that higher level thinking on their own. But this is a place for you to specifically teach that. And then at the bottom, there's another place where it's val R, R-E, where ERR says air and ORR says or. And some of these words are common and some of them aren't. And just remember that all of this is about building pattern recognition in the brain for the child. And there are sentences. Just always keep in mind that when you give a child a sentence to read, does the child have the skill to read that sentence? Meaning that there are just multiple levels on the page. So the IR page is slightly different. The IR page also says and it almost always occurs in the middle of words, but it's not nearly as frequent as ER. So you can take the child through some single syllable words, but look, there's not that many single syllable words with IR. The same with ER. There are a lot of bigger words that have IR in them. So if you're teaching this to a child who's not really ready to read two-syllable words, then you would just work with this one part. Down here in the boxes, there's a place for the children to practice being able to go back and forth between the different Bossy R's that they've already learned. And this is a place to really check if the child has automaticity, that fancy word, which means can they automatically read the word with the correct vowel sound. Heard, hard, born, burn. And before they read those, you may want to have the child take a highlighter and highlight where they see the Bossy R in those words. Maybe they're going to say the sound out loud as they do it, but usually they'll just highlight them at that point. They could also just find that Bossy R and underline them. Maybe you have a child who doesn't need to do that, and they're just like boom, 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 boom. We're not going to force a child to do something that their brain doesn't really need them to do, because we want to move through that part that they've got automaticity with and find the part where they don't and work on that piece of it. So these can also be used to make one of the games called Games of Books. So if you're not familiar with the books game, you can go into the game section and look for the rules on how to play games of books, where the child can practice reading these words over and over again. If this is their instructional level, you can turn this into a game for them. That's really fun. And it's especially fun for older children. They love playing books. I don't know why, but they do. It's like Go Fish, basically, except you get 4 cards in order to be able to lay down. And I think they like the part where you get to steal all the cards from somebody. So if somebody has 3 of the cards and then you ask for it, you get all 3 of their cards. And that seems to be the part that's the most fun. So this page also has a little section on it where you can practice the 1-1-1 doubling rule. And you can only do this if you've taught this rule to a child. So if you've been working with this idea, the 1-1-1 doubling rule with them, this is a place that gives you a reminder that you can review that work with them here with the Bossy R work. If you haven't taught 1-1-1 doubling, this is not a place to teach it, because it takes more work than what's here in order to do that. So that's IR, your IR page, and your last page, drumroll, is UR. So UR also says and it shows up almost always in the middle of words, except for a couple of words where is at the end. And it's not in very many words. So this page has a couple of other difficulties on them. So you have your single syllable words, and then you have your multi-syllable words, and you have another another piece for people to be able to look at, where EAR says So EAR says but EAR also says ear. And so helping children to know that EAR says several different things, because it can also say air, but we don't have that on a page right now. Helping them to see that gives them the understanding that EAR shows up in different ways, but we know what different ways it is, so we can try it out. But here it's going to say because we're working on Bossy R's. And the children can mark the EAR and then read the words and see that there's suffixes or that it's a compound word. And you can talk about those ideas of things you've studied before. Oh, earthworm. Oh, that's a compound word, isn't it? Earth and worm. And it gives you a place to review some of those ideas that you've already previously taught the child. And then when you come down here, you have an opportunity to do that same work, but in a slightly different format that you did on your IR page. So this work where the child's reading words that are similar but with different Bossy R's in the middle really helps the child it's a really great place to check to see how much skill level the child has achieved and being able to know what their Bossy R's are. Down here is a tiny little section that has URR that says and I should probably write says on there now that I'm looking at it. But that's very, very similar to the pages where we were looking at, where ERR says air and ORR says or, and now URR says like in hurry, furry, scurry, and curry. So that says and we're working on the page, so it's not shocking, but it is spelled with a double R. So noticing that that's a double R because the Y is at the end, and we double the R because then the Y could jump over because it says E. Those are things to notice with children. So that is the Bossy R pages. And I just want to show you what some of mine look like after doing some online tutoring. And then I'm going to give you some ideas for work that you can do with children. So when I had a child, I was tutoring online with a child who didn't have any paper. I just told them to write IR across the top of their page. IR, 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 I don't care, doesn't matter to me. You can see here that I was modeling for the child about how to do their syllable division, and that E can jump over and make I say its name. Down here, we did a close examination of this E at the end of the V, after the V. That was really tripping them up. That E is silent. So these are still one syllable words, carve, curve. But in the first two, oh my goodness, there are two consonants here, and E doesn't have enough power to jump over two consonants. So it can't make that A say its name. Oh, but I see something else. I see AR. AR says R. K, R. V, R, V, carve. And then you'll notice down here, E does jump over one letter to make the vowel say its name. I think I misspoke up here and said syllable instead of consonant, but you know what I mean. So E can jump over and make that A say its name. So they get to go back and forth between those two things. And this is, again, I said this is a great place to do that game of books, because when they read these out of order, they really have to work on reading crane, curve, carve, crave. So that's what a page looks like for me when I was working with a child, giving them the examples about how to be able to work with this page. I worked with a girl who really likes color, so she told me to use my blue pencil to underline the base word, and my yellow highlighter to highlight the suffix. So it's fine to mark your pages up with the children. And if they don't have highlighters and they only have, or markers, and they only have colored pencils, they can use their colored pencil to color in the piece of the word that they're working with. That's okay. It's not a problem for them to do that. So one of the pieces to teach a child or review with a child when they're working with Bossy R's, when they first work with Bossy R's, and they want to do two-syllable Bossy R's, is about vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel, syllable dividing. So there are a couple of different ways to do syllable dividing with Bossy R's. Some people love to say, like I have at times, that the Bossy R's are part of, this is the vowel team's syllable family, and this is the Bossy R's syllable family. And many, many children, I have said, just mark all of these with a big V when you're syllable dividing. And that works okay as long as the child has been taught to do vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel syllable dividing. But if you haven't taught the child how to do vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel syllable dividing, if they don't know how to do VCV syllable dividing first choice and VCV syllable dividing second choice, then it can get tricky. So I want to show you another strategy that I think works best with this work that we have created. And it's just to use vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. That's the most common syllable dividing that the children are going to use. In all words, vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel syllable division shows up the most, or a variation of it with multiple syllables, multiple consonants. So when you're marking your page, you can have for the child, you can make for them on another piece of paper, you can write the words bigger. It makes it easier for them as they are initially practicing how to do syllable division. When I'm doing syllable division on this page, it's because my child has already practiced the syllable division on a bigger page. And now we're over here, and this child was 11, and I was saying, where would you divide that? And they were like, between the L. Where would you divide it? Between the M, because we're online. Where would you divide it? Between the C and T. And they're telling me where to divide it because they've already done so much work like this. So with a child who needs to take a look at this, especially when they're first taught how to syllable divide with Bossy R's, we're going to mark our vowels. We're going to mark our consonants and divide right down the middle. We read our first syllable, gar, our second syllable, den, and put them together, garden. Same thing here. And I would tell the child, mark your vowels, mark your consonant, and now syllable divide. You can do this work online using the whiteboard on Zoom. You just write the words on the whiteboard, and then the child, if they have the ability to do it, which almost all of them can, they can come in and mark the vowels, mark the consonants, and syllable divide using the whiteboard. On Darling, we mark our vowels, we mark our consonants, and we syllable divide. Darling. Army, we mark our vowels, we mark our consonant, and then we syllable divide. And that Y is a consonant, a vowel there. Me. I know it looks like my, doesn't it? But that's Y, baby, E. What part? And you could ask them, what does that remind you of? Y at the end of a big word. Y at the end of a two-syllable word. Y, baby, E. And here's our vowels. Here's our consonants. And here again, if you mark right down the middle, they might say Marie. Oh, you know what? I see ARR. ARR says air, doesn't it? Yeah, ARR says air. Air, E, Mary. Now, when you get to starve, I already showed you this, but I like to put it on the syllable dividing because they can go vowel, vowel, consonant, consonant. Here, starve, starve. And they'll read it, but then we say, is that two syllables? Starve. what is a syllable? And then we get to talk about a syllable. A syllable is a whole word, and I always teach it like this: a whole word or a part of a word with one talking vowel. You remember that with me? A whole word or a part of a word with one talking vowel. So let's look at starve and analyze it. That E is silent, isn't it? That helps me remember it's silent. That E is silent. St, st, R, v. I'm going to put it on my arm. St, R, v. St, R, v. Starve. R is my talking vowel. R. This word has one talking vowel. Starve. It's one syllable. And I might do all of that thinking out loud without ever involving the child or asking them a question. Because what I'm modeling is metacognitive thinking. I'm showing them how to think through this process of analyzing a word. I need to demonstrate for them, how do you analyze a word? How do you think about a word? How do you decide if a word is one syllable or two syllables? What tools do I have in my toolbox to be able to do that? And modeling that for children who have had so much difficulty with reading, instead of asking them to give you information or answer your questions, keeps them calm and anxiety free. And that place allows them to be able to think. Because once the anxiety kicks in, the thinking stops. Es muy importante. All right, so here's the second piece that you can do with kiddos. I love this kind of work to send home with children to do, or to give them to take back to the class to do, or as an activity, that all of these words have AR in the middle. I'm not gonna, if you notice, I didn't write AR at the top, because what I do not want them to do is to see AR written at the top and just go copy, 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 copy. Nope. This is their AR page, AR car R. What I might let them do is draw a car on their page. Oh my goodness, don't I have the best car ever? This is going to be a hot dog car from the Henry Ford Museum. And it's going to remind me of car, AR car R, that's my page. So now I have my space with my cues that tell me, I need to put AR in here. AR hard. AR cart. And if you were going to have them do this with you, that's what you would want them to do, is to write in AR and say it. AR, and they might say R, or they might just read the word, depending on how much help they need. And then you can have sentences at the bottom with words in them for the child to complete the words, which is kind of fun and gives them additional practice, and then allows them to be able to go back and read the sentence. The most important piece of this is that there's nothing in this sentence that the child hasn't been taught. And you don't have to think up sentences on your own, because you have a handy dandy AR page, and your AR page has sentences on it. Sentences on the AR page have single syllable words in them. They also have multi-syllable words in them. Some of them have difficulties like rice and starve, and some of them are fairly simple. Spin the yarn to make the cloth. Notice that's exactly what I wrote over here. Spin the yarn to make the cloth. So this is a way for you to be able to give the child a piece of paper that they can then take home, and they can practice the words, the individual words, and they can practice reading their sentence. And maybe they'll remember to bring it back to you and read their words to you and their sentence to you. And for sure, they can take it home, and you can encourage them to read it to the grown-up or the big sister or big brother who's in their house, or even to their little sister or little brother. They might want to see their work they're doing. So this is a wonderful and kind of extension activity beyond game playing. Of course, we have the games. And the game work can, for all of the different Bossy R's, the game work is, how many games do I have? The game work comes in 2 different levels. So there's 2 games for every Bossy R page. One game has just single syllable words on them. Oop, that one has 2 words in it. Hopefully that's not too tricky. Oh, this one has a 2-syllable word, but they're the same syllable. So the games have 1 level, and then they have a 2nd level. So you can use your game page as an additional lesson for a child who needs more work. So let's say you do your first lesson with them. Maybe you create a page like this for them to be able to do. Maybe these are phrases at the bottom instead of sentences that you're having them read. Maybe that's the level that they're at. And you want to give them a chance to work with more words or highlight more single syllable words. And maybe you've already used the words on this page, or they've worked with these words and they need to see them again in a different way. Well, here they are in a different way. So they don't look like the same words to that child at all. You're not asking them to redo the page. This is their game. So before we play the game, let's find all the URs. And you can do this regardless, that you can say to the child, let's find all the UR church words in our game, and they can come in and underline them, or they could come and color all the URs. They're going on a UR hunt and finding all those URs, and every time they find one, they can say and then they might say, Miss Kristen, I see another and I would say, oh great, do you want to underline it or highlight it? Oh, I want to underline it. All right, fabulous. That's ER. What is that? I think I remember. Oh, it's ER, flower, You can pre-read the words on your card if your child needs that level of help. And then you're going to cut your page up after you do your work. And that scissor work is very helpful for a child who struggles with any sort of dysgraphia or just poor handwriting, even if it wouldn't be officially dysgraphia. And then cut their words up, their pages up, and you would have 2 of these, cut their pages up and then be able to play Go Fish. Or they could play concentration, and there's a couple of other games that we've created out of using 2 pages. So there's an easier page, and then there is a more challenging page for each of the Bossy R's. Here's one that I worked with a child before COVID. And this child was looking at theirs and marking their words that they couldn't read. So they read all of these fine, but these words they stumbled over. So the words that they stumbled over are ones that I had them mark. I said, go ahead and mark those words. And you can see that for this child, they did AR as 1 chunk, as 1 big V. And then they syllable divided it using their first choice syllable division, because they did already know that. So, and then down here, they still marked it as a big V, but there happened to be 2 consonants. So that fit that syllable division pattern. So you'll work with that and figure out that piece of it. But then after the child is done marking all of those, then they can cut those up and play that game that goes with that. And again, you would want to have 2 pages that you cut, 2 pages that are the same cut, so that you can play the game with the child. So those are some of the different ways that you can use the work. You can also take the sentences that are on the pages and write them on a bigger strip of paper and cut them apart and let the child put the sentences back together. You might even just take half of the sentence on one part of the page and half of the sentence on another piece of paper and lay them out and let the children match up multiple sentences, kind of as a matching activity like you would do with compound words. So I've done those before, so I won't take more time to do that now. But just keep in mind that while the pages are created the way they that you have the bones of being able to create more activities out of these, that you can create more games with the sections of words that are here. All of these on this particular page could be turned into a game of books. So lots of different opportunities for you to use the pages in the many different ways that you'll discover work for you for children at different ages. So that concludes the Bossy R work. And just remember that Bossy R, I think the last piece of information to tell you is that Bossy R tends to be one of the things that kids stumble over as they start learning vowel teams. That a lot of early readers have Bossy R words included in them and are taught as sight words. So in the Brain Friendly Reading program, we've pushed Bossy R word work up in the curriculum after the children learn a lot of short vowel work, and then they do a few vowel teams, and then they do their Bossy R work. Because the Bossy R work is, especially ER, is so prevalent. And when kids know their Bossy R work, it opens up a whole world to them about what that R is doing next to that vowel. Because without that secret knowledge, that can be very confusing. So that concludes the Bossy R work. And if you want more information about Bossy R work, you can go to the Brain Friendly Reading website. You can also go to the YouTube channel for Brain Friendly Reading, where you can find videos on how to tap the charts and make sure that you're using the correct sounds with the children, and for examples about how to play the different kinds of games that are in the games books for not only for the Bossy R work, but for the other work as well. All right, I hope you have a good day. Thank you.
To find out more, go to brainfriendlyreading.org. There you'll find the products that we sell, along with information about the trainings we provide for tutors, teachers, and parents.